Hi, Elaine here from Marker Geek. Today I'm sharing the card making process and the colouring process for a card I've created using one of the new Mama Elephant releases, the Penguins Waddle. I love these group stamp sets that they create. They've got one with snowmen, one with cats, one with dogs, one with bunnies, and they've also got the Wild Raw, which has got lots of different animals in it. I just love them. I think they're really fun, and they create some really interesting and effective cards. I particularly enjoyed colouring this one because there's a lot of repetitive colouring and I didn't have to think too much, so it was actually quite relaxing. I chose my colours and then just went for it. I'm not going to make you watch me colour every single penguin throughout. I'm just going to show you a few of them and then kind of skip through to the detail stage. Because otherwise you'll be sitting here forever and it's not that interesting, because I do use the same colours throughout and the same process. As you will see, I'm not leaving them white. That is a choice that you could make. You could leave the white of the paper, or you could add some really basic shading around the outside sort of that part of the body, underneath the beak and things like that, just to give the suggestion of some shadows. I prefer to give it a slightly more natural look. I'm not going for realism because this is a cartoon image. It's clearly stylized. This is not what penguins actually look like, although they do read as penguins. So I'm going for a natural look, but not realistic. And the thing with white is, when you look at something that's white, it's not just pure white. It will have shadows, it will pick up colours from the environment around it. It will have a warmer or a cooler tone to it, depending on what it is. For things like penguins, or living things, for animals, I like to go with some warmer colours. I could have used warm greys, but I prefer to create a more sort of natural and interesting tone using BV31 or BV31, E40 and E0. I also like to use the BV31 with E30, that's another good option. And just using the very light E0 just to finish it, like fill the area out. I didn't want to leave a stark white, the stark white of the paper. It looks quite dark at first. Then when you start colouring and you add in the black areas of the penguins, it starts to read more as a sort of white. The colour that you're looking at will very much change in relation to colours that are around it. So you can go fairly dark when colouring white. It seems weird and it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but as you add in the darker colour, the white areas read as being lighter white areas because of the relationship to the colours next to them. So don't be afraid to give your penguins a little bit of extra interest and life and dimension, whatever you want to call it, by going a little bit darker. Just try it and see how it looks. I like the overall effect you'll see when it's all coloured in. And I think that combination of the earth tones with the BV just makes it a little bit more interesting and lively than it would have been if I'd just coloured them with my warm greys. Although, like I say, that's absolutely an option, and one that I have used before. If you don't have warm greys and you don't have the earth tones, but you've got the cool greys, absolutely use what you have. They will still read as penguins. But yeah, maybe if you wanted to explore some other options for colouring white and you wanted to change it up, have a go with this and see how you feel. But remember, you won't get the full effect until you finish colouring. There, as you can see, with all of the black in, those white areas don't look quite as dark. They read a little bit better. I'm just adding the beaks in now, and I just went with 2 markers for that because it's such a tiny area. And you will see that throughout the image, I use the same colours when doing the details. So the 2 colours that I'm using here, I add a third one in and use those for the flower centre and also the little crown that's on one of the penguins. And then I'm using the same pinks and purples throughout as well, just to keep things cohesive so it all kind of hangs together nicely and you don't have areas really fighting for your attention. It gives them enough interest without being a mess. You may also notice here that a couple of areas of this stamp outline didn't come out so well. I'm going to fix that later on with a Copic multi-liner, but I thought I'd just explain what happened because it's kind of funny. Usually when you get a new stamp set, especially a larger one like this, you may need to re-stamp it a few times, which is why I love having a MISTI stamp platform. Or whatever stamp platform you may happen to have. I use the MISTI for the most part. But I was kind of struggling with this one and I was like, oh, what is the problem here? I think I stamped it like 4 or 5 times in the end and I was having to put kind of extra pressure on certain areas. So I was thinking, oh, what is wrong with this stamp? User error, obviously. I was actually, I'd used a different magnet to the one that I normally use in my MISTI. And I didn't realise until I came to stamp a different image later on and was having the same problem that actually it was the thickness of the magnet was slightly different. And so it was actually not letting the MISTI door close fully as it usually would, which is why I was having to give extra pressure in certain areas. So there's nothing wrong with the stamp, it's just the user. Anyway, it was an easy fix. It was frustrating at the time, but quite amusing afterwards when I realised. And I just fixed up those areas with a multi-liner. That's really easy to do. Yeah. I'm colouring the very fine small details here with my Copic markers. If you find that you have issues with marker control and you don't really successfully get into those small areas, you end up in a bit of a mess, try using some coloured fine liner pens. There is absolutely nothing wrong with adding in these teeny tiny details with a different medium. Maybe coloured pencil if that's what you have. It's absolutely fine to chop and change and mix your mediums. There are some Copic friendly fine liners out there that won't react with the Copics. I'll pop a link to those in the description box below. So yeah, I'm an advocate of using what you have and mixing things up. So don't feel like just because you're colouring this image with Copic markers that you have to colour the entire thing faithfully with Copic markers or you failed. No. The object is to colour the image. Use whatever you need to do that, to achieve it. Throw in some pencil colouring to add some extra shading. Use whatever you like. If anyone tells you that that's cheating, which is something that I've heard in the past, just ignore them because that's ridiculous. It's not cheating, it's just using what you have to its best advantage. The whole point of this process is to have fun, and be creative and enjoy yourself. So there is no right or wrong way to do that. And yeah, slight rant here. I often hear people or see people online asking what the right way to use the markers is and wanting to use Copics or whatever medium it is in the right way. I want to do a class so that I can use them correctly. And while there are obviously good practices, there are good ways to get the most out of whatever materials you're using, there's no like set right way to use a marker. Use it how you like. Play with it. Have fun with it. Don't be scared of it. Enjoy the process of finding out what your tools, what your supplies can do. Don't let someone on the internet tell you that, you know, you're not holding it the right way or whatever. It's just colour and enjoy it. There's no one right way to do most things, especially when it comes to art and creative processes. You'll find lots of different advice, different tips, different approaches to using whatever medium it is. Take as much information from other people's experiences as you can, but ultimately play and figure out what you like to do. So, sermon over. Now I'm moving on to adding some fun details. Now that the colouring is finished, I grabbed some Winsor & Newton gouache in a white and watered it down on my glass media mat, and using a really cheap fan brush. You don't need anything expensive for this, you get them in packs in pound shops or cheap art stores, Hobbycraft, etc. If you're in the US, they'll be in large craft stores there. Just use a really cheap one. Water down the gouache, or you could use a white acrylic paint, whatever you've got on hand. Just water it down so it's nice and thin. Test it first on a piece of scrap paper, and basically I just like to tap it. I tap the handle of the brush on my hand and then it causes the splatter. If you've got a splatter box, that would be ideal. Otherwise, just protect the area around you or you will end up with spots of white paint on everything. Now you can see that I'm using the sentiment die that actually comes in the coordinating die set for this stamp set. I don't always buy the coordinating dies for these particular stamp sets, but I really wanted this sentiment. So I grabbed that. I've cut that from some glitter cardstock and then a couple of pieces of scrap white cardstock. I like to layer up word elements to create a nice sturdy piece that stands out on the front of the card. I'm using Ranger Multimedia Matte glue it's the small bottles that you can get, and I've replaced the applicator tip with a fine tip applicator. I think they're from the Doris bottles that you can buy in packs as empty bottles, and I've just taken the applicator tip from one of those. This was a tip I picked up from, I think it was Jennifer Maguire, like so many tips that we all pick up. It just makes it really easy to apply adhesive to die cut words and small fiddly things. Now I'm layering up those pieces that I cut to put together the front of my card. I use Beacon Adhesive's Fabri-Tac glue for this. I prefer a wet adhesive over using something like tape, simply because I never get things lined up and I always find tape really difficult to work with for this. With the liquid adhesive, I can get a little bit of wiggle room just to reposition things, as you can see. I've been using the Beacon Adhesives Fabri-Tac for probably about 10 years now, I think. And it works really well. It's nice and strong. yeah, that's all I have to say about that really. It just works for me. For the die cut sentiment that I'm going to use the Ranger Multimedia Matte again, simply because with the fine tip applicator it is easier to apply the adhesive where I want it. Also, it will dry matte on the card front, so if there are any little smears or splodges, you won't really see them on the end result. And then I'm just going to add some finishing touches using a Sakura Jelly Roll Stardust pen, the clear one, just to add some extra interest and to sort of bring attention back down to the image, because obviously that sparkly die cut sort of catches the eye quite well. So I wanted to balance things out, and that's the whole thing. So thank you for joining me. Don't forget, blog link in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.